This is Gwerefu Island in Badagry. My name is Theodore Obichike, and this is another edition on Shantafric, Tourism Without Boundaries. Over the period, we've been talking about the point of no return, but the actual point of activity which brought all this out is Gwerefu Island in Badagry. We came to Badagry Island to see things for ourselves, a border town, coastal town in Lagos. And interestingly enough, we started by driving around, and then we eventually ended up at the beach side, saw a lot of interesting things. But the most sobering aspect was going through Chief Seriki Abbas Barakun, which is more or less a museum in contemporary times about what happened during the slave period. The end point of this particular exercise is jumping on a boat across the Ethiop River, the lagoon that brings us to Gwerefu Island, where the very originator of the name Badagry, the Agbadagreme gentleman, whose name formed Badagry, was living. On this particular episode, poignant and sad, illuminating and full of tops and turbid factors, telling us about the whole process of how the slaves were moved away from Badagry into the ships onto the New World, into Europe and America, is the very essence of this particular episode. It is very riveting. It is as tragic as it is real. Pay attention, stay back, relax, and be part of this episode of Shantafric, Tourism Without Boundaries. I'm just about to enter the boat. It's called the lifeboat, which is yellow in color, covered, and it's taking us across the Lagos Porto Novo River to the point of no return, which is the island where the slaves are taken to before they are shipped off to Portugal via ship. This is called the lifeboat, which is a covered boat right on the Lagos Porto Novo River. This river transgresses all the way from Cotonou and joins the Atlantic Ocean. The boat is taking us across to the island, which is called the point of no return. The point of no return as consistent with all the ports across West Africa, in Cotonou, in Ghana, in Egori Island in Dakar. This is where they take the slaves as the final place they put their foot on Africa before they join slave ships and go either to Europe, to America, or to South America. Welcome to Gwerefu Island, which is the island otherwise known as the point of no return. We have just come on the lifeboat. It's a nice cruise, short cruise, and we're now stepping somewhat expectantly into the location known as the point of no return in Badagry.
is called Berefu Island. Berefu is a Yoruba word meaning a dry land. An island is a place surrounded by water. And here we have a lagoon, while the other side we have Atlantic Ocean. During the time of slavery, minimum of 1,600 slaves were being led out from the slave cell across the Lagos-Port Novo Lagoon down to the island we have called Berefu Island. And then nobody lives in this island. When someone is captured living here, he or she will be captured as a slave. During the time of slavery, the king, the queen, the prince, the princess, the chief were all captured as a slave then. But after the abolition of slavery, we have about 3 to 4 villages whereby people are now living in the island we are. And the island we are, it used to be a thick forest then. And the slave route that leads to the point of no return, it used to be a narrow path whereby the slave will have to walk in a single file down to the point of no return. Call this well slave spirit attenuation well. Attenuation means to weaken or to lose. At this particular spot, then we stop the slave over there and fetch the water out for them to drink one after the other. And after drinking the water, they have to lose their memory for just only 3 months. And the reason why they used to give them this water to drink is because while in the slave ship, it may be 800 slaves in a single slave ship. It may be more than that, depending the size of the slave ship. With about 10 to 15 European slave traders, that will be taking them down to their various destinations. Now, when the ship get to the IC, the slave will want to use their total number to revolt, to fight their master in order to overtake the slave ship from their masters.
From the crisp rendition of our tour guide, it's extremely clear to us that there is a clear case of very inhuman treatment to slaves. There is a lot of debate about reparation. The global outview is that there is still slavery, even if it is an indirect way. And this bears an eloquent testimony to our remembrance of what happened to us, so that essentially we will never. There are a lot of interesting facts about Berefu Island. I guess it's symptomatic of virtually all other locations where you have a point of no return in the African slave trade saga. The first thing I noticed, jumping into the boat, very modern boat, covered actually, I didn't feel the sunlight, and certainly I had no shackles on my hands and my feet, is that it will take a very brave man to swim this lagoon. And I'm sure it was even much more formidable way back in the past when these slaves were there with their chains and manacles and whips and not well fed, being loaded onto canoes really to move them across to the island. It took a while, and you can bet that if somebody died in the process out of shock of being taken away so suddenly, or perhaps wounds sustained in the process of being beaten for being a slave, they'll probably chuck the person into the river.
On their way to the point of no return, any slave that died on the road, if the European slave trader have time for such a slave, they will remove the chain and dig a ground and bury such a slave in the island we have. But if there is no much time, they will throw such a slave into the forest. And those are the reasons why we should appreciate the gift of freedom that we were not born during the time of slavery.
Now, upon getting to the island, what was important was to see the geographical location of the island. The island created a very convenient landmass that transgressed directly to the shore or to the beach, to the ocean. I'm sure that as the slaves started the march on the narrow track, being headed and guarded heavily, and I understand from history records that these this path where they followed, there were heavy rocks way back then, put to barricade them to discourage any attempt for anybody to run away. And now you need to imagine somebody that eats once a day, has no form of exercise, has been sleeping amongst excreta and urine, perhaps infected with malaria, because this is still a humid tropics, it has always been. Now has to trek about 3-4 kilometers across this island in chains, and then under the heavy heat of the sun. And it's strategic and tactical of the slave raiders. They keep these slaves under these weakened conditions to minimize the tendency they may have to want to initiate some aggressive activity or try to run away.
During the time of slavery, minimum of 1,600 slaves were being led out from the slave cell across the Lagos-Port Novo Lagoon. During the time of slavery, the king, the queen, the prince, the princess, the chief were all captured as a slave then. But after the abolition of slavery, we have about 3 to 4 villages whereby people are now living in the island we are.
Now, halfway through, you will find what we call the attenuation well. And there's a lot of legends hanging around these attenuation wells. I've heard about it in the Cameroons, I've heard about it in Ouidah, in Cotonou, I've heard about it even when I visited the Lac Rose, that is the Pink Lake in Dakar. I've heard about it right here again in Badagry, that there is a magical potion or some kind of juju, that is associated with the well.
There's a shrine over there. Our African chief went there and brought out a shrine, a voodoo, and dug this well and added a sham to it, a voodoo, and the water become poisonous. Mostly, some will say the water is still effective, while some will say the water is no more effective. For yet today in Badagry, nobody drink and fetches water out from this well. When you get to Benin Republic in Ouidah, it was a tree, the tree of oblivion. The male will go around the tree 9 times, while the female had to go around the tree 7 times. And after going around the tree, they had to lose their memory and their senses for just only 3 months, for them not to revolt with their masters.
Resistant souls who knew they were being taken away to where they didn't know had to drink from this well. And there was something about the well and the water in the well that invariably made them compliant. It made them forget, suffers from perhaps temporary amnesia. I've read in some books that the amnesia lasts for 3 months, so that they don't resist their captors, they don't even miss leaving home, they just walk willy-nilly like that, like zombies, straight into the boats that were taking them onto the ship that were taking them away. Whether this is really true or not, I'm not really in a position to confirm, but that's what history records. And I can tell you reliably that there's a lot of hocus pocus and mumbo jumbo and juju in African social traditions and culture. So one's hardly in a position to say whether it's actually true or not, unless you were there to see it happen yourself. Now, finally, as we keep walking down the road, finally to the edge of the ocean, it's quite a distance. It's laborious, even as I wasn't carrying anything except my iPad. You now can imagine the thought process of these slaves. You now imagine the way they feel, because they probably wouldn't be the first set of slaves. So the trauma is that people have come and gone, people enter the boats and disappear. And because of those dark ages, so to speak, they probably think people are going to be taken away to be eaten. So they have no clear idea of what's going to happen. So you can now begin to imagine their state of mind as they move towards the boat, knowing that they will never come back this way again. None of the people that went before ever came back. And that there was nothing they could do about it. That's actually the scary part. Being in a circumstance that you could not help, being in a circumstance that you could do absolutely nothing about. That's very, very unfortunate. And that, in effect, is why the point or door of no return is very significant and very relevant in any discourse that has to do with African slavery. Because it's like a child going into secondary school or boarding school, miss their parents, they cry. A young woman getting married to her husband, leaving her father and her mother, they cry. And when people die, of course, people cry, they feel bad. Now imagine a situation where unwillingly, without any discussion on the matter, you're torn away from your father and your mother, you're grabbed and beaten up, treated in a subhuman manner, made to realize that you were not less than a human being, and then force-fed into a boat and carried away and put in a ship that was going to a place you could never really know anything about. It must have been extremely scary. And it is unfortunate, very sad indeed, that it is part of the history of the slave trade as it affects Africa as a continent. Welcome back to the banks of the Lagos Port Novo Lagoon. We are on our way back to the Badagry mainland. We came across here to the point of no return, and then on our way to the point of no return, we were able to see the well of attenuation. We were able to see the Atlantic vis-a-vis the Lagos Port Novo Lagoon, with the island in between separating them. It was for us an experience of sorts. We could empathize with the pain of the slaves. We felt the sense of dislocation, the sense of hopelessness, the sense of absolute rejection from their own people.
Follow me on Shont Afwe, while I introduce to you the building of Sir Frederick Lord Lugard, the first Governor General in Nigeria. Amalgamation between the southern and northern Nigeria took place in the same building of Sir Frederick Lord Lugard in the year 1914.
Be part of history as we go through once again the rigors and the shock, disbelief, and disapprobation that the slaves must have felt being forced to pass through the point of no return in Gberefu Island in Badagry. To bring in inbound tourists to this event and to this location, they will either have to come by liners or by air. And that is the synergy between tourism and that transport development in all its modes: road, rail, water, and air. This is the import of Chantafrique, to create opportunities, to let people see what we have, to understand that it is immensely underutilized and untapped, and to find a way forward to ensure that tourism and aviation development as part of transport development is taken more seriously, not just in Nigeria but across the breadth and length of Africa. It's sobering indeed in its effects when you come to a location like Badagry, which has the most ambient and salubrious environment, the best of beaches, fantastic resorts like Whispering Palms, lovely late at night locations, what the French call the soirees, where you relax in the night and have a good time. I've certainly enjoyed many a draft of palm wine right here while we're at this. And it jolts the senses when you think of man's inhumanity to man. I remember it was Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe that made a quotation and he said that man's inhumanity to man must cease. It's quite pertinent to assume that when he made that statement, he certainly must have been thinking in part about slavery. Slavery does not just refer to catching people or grabbing people by force and selling them off. Sometimes it refers to things like being narrow-minded. Sometimes it refers to how one perceives issues. Sometimes it refers to how one relates with things. You can be a slave to anger. You can be addicted to alcohol. You can be addicted to chemical substances. Those are different categories of slavery. And it is extremely important for us to point out that the whole activity in Badagry is not about slavery. Anyone watching Chant of Freak from the onset will see that we're looking from a kaleidoscopic point of view, we're looking from a holistic point of view about what Badagry as a geographical location represents, what Badagry as a historical location and the reference point is, and its impact in studies that has to do with Africans in diaspora, how they got there, and their impact out there in the environment where they are. That's why it's extremely relevant to note that in the dynamics of movement, tourism, as that applies to slavery, a lot of people come from Europe and America to Badagry to see things for themselves and understand how the process of their ancestors got forcibly translocated and how they ended up where they are. It is a work in progress. We learn a lot from it. And we thank God for the extraordinary opportunity to be here, to have experienced this, and to be in a position, shall we say, to even talk about it. It was the great Roman general, Julius Caesar, that said, I came, I saw, I conquered. In our specific case, I think I will say, we came, we saw, and we get the idea. And we pray that slavery will never come back again to Africa. Thank you for attention. My name once again is Theodore Obi Chike. This is Chant of Freak, Tourism Without Boundaries. Thanks for watching.